Hey there everybody, today we're taking a look at an early access game. It's been a little while since I've done an entry into the Hitchhiker's Guide to Early Access series, so I figured let's do that. Today it's Victor Vran, which is an action RPG by the developers of the Tropico games. Yes, the Banana Republic Island Government Simulator games. They're called Haemimont, I believe is how you would pronounce that. I've never actually heard it before. They're taking a bit of an interesting break from what they normally do with their kind of management sims and making an action RPG. But this aRPG is a lot different than many others of its type, and that's kind of why I'm so interested in it and why I wanted to cover it, because it's got a lot of different mechanics to it, which are pretty interesting, so let's just get into it now. Now remember, this is an early access title. So, first of all, you may notice that I'm moving around without using the mouse. That's very different from most action RPGs. WASD is actually movement, which is very strange. Normally you click to move. Think Diablo. And there's also a jump button, which is very weird. Normally jumping is not something that you actually have to do ever. And in fact, there is even a wall jump. And it allows you to get to secret areas sometimes. Lots of secrets in this game. And also you may notice that clicking actually attacks, which is, again, very different. Usually you have to click on an enemy, basically, to attack. This is more of a hack-and-slash kind of combat system, which is strange, to say the least, when it comes to action RPGs. It almost reminds me a bit of what they did with Sacred 3, only this is actually good. Yeah. So, the game is, of course, in the aRPG style, so let's just go into an actual area, first of all. So, this is your little hub area that I'm in right now, where you'll find your NPCs, quests, shops, things like that, and also a stash. And there's this map which allows you to sort of teleport out to one of the various areas of the world. And some of these areas, like, say, the hunting grounds, are very sizable. They're pretty huge, and these stars indicate different sort of optional objectives you can complete. And all of these other little things are actually dungeons that you can find in those areas. So, for instance, the Royal Gardens actually encompasses this entire area right here. And all of these other little things, this den, all of these are dungeons in that kind of big area. So, I'm going to a new one right now, and that's the High Quarter, so let's do that. You click on it, and it shows you some things about it. It shows you what it looks like, but it also shows you these are these stars. So, to 5-star level, this is what I'm going to have to do. I'm going to have to find all the secrets. There are 6 of them. I'm going to have to apparently quench some flames, slay some specific monsters. That sounds interesting. And then solve the mystery of the haunted pumpkin, which I have no idea what that means. And you're rewarded with different things for each of them. So this is experience, this is gold, this is treasure, and this is a very large treasure chest that has who knows what in it, hopefully something pumpkin themed. And you may also notice these little shields. These are hexes. This is basically optional difficulty. You can activate these hexes and they make the game more difficult for you in some way, but they give you more experience and more item find, magic find, basically. I have the Hex of Time active right now, and I've killed almost 1,000 monsters with it active, and those stars actually increase the more you kind of slay monsters with them active. I don't know if the stars will actually make the increased XP and item find more powerful, or if it's just kind of a bragging rights thing, because I haven't had this active for long enough to get more stars. But there's also the Hex of Tyranny, Tenacity, Pain, and Malice, and they do different things. And in fact, some of the actual objectives here for some of the dungeons require you to have one or more of these hexes active in order to actually get them. So let's go in here and start playing. Now, you may notice, first of all, that it has a very gothic fantasy style to it, which I really like an awful lot. The game has a pretty fantastic graphic style, actually, because I love the whole gothic fantasy kind of weird style. And in that respect, it's somewhat similar to something along the lines of the Van Helsing games by Neocore. And that is an apt comparison, because they are also action RPGs with a sort of gothic fantasy style, but of course, gameplay-wise, they're completely different. Now, I suppose I should really be talking about the gameplay because it's pretty much the most off-kilter thing about this game. The questing and things like that is fairly similar to what you would expect from a game like this, but the actual gameplay mechanics, combat, and so forth are a lot different, and loot is a lot different as well. So, what you may notice down here is that I actually have a set of abilities, but they're tied to my weapon. So right now I'm using this longsword. The way this game works is every every weapon actually has abilities that it grants you, which is a lot different than what you would expect. Normally in action RPGs, you collect loot near constantly, and they give you stats. And the actual weapon you're using only matters in so much as either what class you are, or what kind of stats it gives you. So, like, you know, daggers oftentimes have really high crit strike, or spears have long reach, things like that. It's a bit more simple, which is fine, but that's just the way they normally work. In this case, most of your ability set that you'll be using at any given time actually comes from your weapon, which is very strange. So basically, even adding only one weapon to the game is actually kind of a big deal, because every weapon has 3 abilities that go along with it, every weapon type. And that drastically can change what your playstyle is, which is a really interesting idea. So as you can see here, the basic attack with the longsword is just a hack. It's 3 slashes. And the last slash, that kind of red whoosh there, inflicts vulnerable, which means that the next attack that I hit any target with that debuff with is an instant crit, guaranteed. The other 2 basically have special conditions if you crit an enemy, which is interesting because basically the way the weapons in this game work is they synergize with themselves very, very well. The abilities, it's almost like a kit for a character in a MOBA game, where the abilities have very specific uses that kind of synergize together, and if you kind of read the description, it actually gives you kind of an idea of the general strategy and playstyle you should be using while using that particular piece of equipment, which is, again, very, oh god, interesting, and not normal in action RPGs, and I really, really like that because it's so different. That isn't a champion enemy. Just like in, you know, many action RPGs, there are champions. And other enemies with different, basically, rarities, blue names, yellow names, and things like that, that are much more difficult, but give you a lot more everything. I'll explain the loot system in a little while, because that's another thing that's quite different about this game. So, essentially, what you're doing is every time you're using any given weapon, you will have a very specific kit that you're given with that weapon, and that determines your playstyle. So, there are no classes in this game, and I mean that quite literally. You don't choose a class when you start, you don't have any kind of stats that are tied to a class, or abilities that are tied to a class. There's no class system in the game whatsoever. You always play the same character, Victor Vran, who is a bit Helsingy. He's kind of a, you know, professional monster hunter. I missed horribly. But what you actually do with that character depends entirely on you and what equipment you decide to use. So if I wanted to switch out, you can carry 2 weapons at once, which is very standard for action RPGs, but because of the different way that the actual weapon kit system works in this game, it's actually very imperative that you carry multiple different weapons. So this is a lightning gun. The lightning gun electrocutes things quite effectively, and is very much a sort of crowd control weapon. It's not per hit nearly as powerful as a sword would be, but every attack will chain to other enemies near the one you're actually attacking, therefore making it a bit more, you know, effective for large numbers of smaller enemies. And then you have this ball lightning attack that basically seeks out and hits any enemy with the electrocution effect on them. So basically you electrocute a large number of enemies and then launch ball lightning in their direction, and it bounces in between and is just a huge crowd control effect. And then you have this ability, which is a really big kind of lightning mine that goes for a certain distance and then explodes like that, and electrocutes everything in the area. And as you can see now, this little lightning ball is going to be bouncing back and forth, seeking all of the electrified enemies, and that's what makes the lightning gun synergize with itself. It's very powerful for crowd control. Now, another thing you will have noticed probably is that your individual swings very much will hit multiple enemies at once. They have that sort of cleaving effect, which is always awesome in an action RPG. I love that. It just makes the combat feel more kinetic and more satisfying. The way the sword synergizes is this slash attack is a big knockback and a big heavy hit on a single enemy. But if you crit an enemy with it, not only, of course, is it going to do a lot of damage because it's just one big damaging strike, it's also going to instantly recharge itself, because all of your, having no mana meter, essentially, all of your main weapon abilities are cooldown based. And so, that is kind of how the sword synergizes with itself, try and inflict vulnerability to as many enemies as possible, and then crit them with your powerful attacks. And this dash attack will daze a single enemy when hit with it, but if you if you crit with it, the daze becomes AoE and allows you to actually do a little bit of crowd control with it. Although not as much as with something like the lightning gun, of course. Now, you may also notice the fact that I'm dropping meteors from the sky, which is a little conspicuous. You have what are also called these demon powers. I don't know exactly why they're called that. The story isn't fully finished yet. You may notice that there's some text on the screen. Presumably there's going to be some voice acting for that. Eventually, there just isn't yet. You have this kind of voice that talks to you. I'm not sure if you're crazy or what. But you have demon powers, and that's what this little yellow meter here is. The meter, you actually choose when you start the game what piece of armor you're going to wear. And it fills up depending on what piece of armor you're wearing. By default, it fills up by attacking things and by taking damage. So it's kind of like a limit break meter, almost. I'm using a kind of a caster or mage-y style armor instead that makes it fill up by itself, but a lot more slowly than it necessarily would by attacking things. So it just kind of, it regenerates on its own, which I prefer. And then you use segments of this. When you start, you only have one segment, but since I'm higher level, I've gotten a second one. You can then use one of your demon abilities once it fills up, and it will take the entire thing. Now, demon abilities are another part of the whole making a build thing that this game offers that kind of determines your playstyle. So the ones I'm using are a blink, which is a very heavy single target damage blink. So you teleport, like a blink would, and you do a large amount of damage where you end up, as well as getting a small speed boost afterwards. So it's good for escape, it's good for initiating, it's good for a lot of things, really. That's why I like to run with it. And then I'm also using this meteor ability, which you also probably noticed, because it's really very conspicuous. Meteors rain from the sky and kill everything. There are a lot of demon abilities. Basically, what this game offers you that's different from a lot of action RPGs, if I was to put it in kind of like a sentence, the fact that there are no classes or anything like that means that your builds are always your own. You're constantly building your own character via the use of what gear you're using, and that's pretty much it. You don't choose a class or anything like that. Your builds all dynamically come from what equipment you're actually using. And that will bring me to the loot system after I kill everything here, hopefully. Have a leech bomb. And that makes the builds very kind of active in your strategy. So let's go to the inventory. Boop. This is your inventory. Magical, I know. You may notice that there's no armor slots really besides this one. And that's the case. You don't actually get armor to equip, which is very strange for an action RPG. Normally gear encompasses everything. Helmets, gloves, boots, chest armor, everything. In this case, you don't actually drop armor like this. You choose this at the beginning of the game, and that's it. You don't get any more, as far as I can tell, for now at least. The things you can equip are 2 potions, 2 weapons, 2 demon abilities, and destiny cards, which is another thing I'll have to explain. So weapons, as you can see, don't drop as often as you would expect in a lot of action RPGs. In fact, loot by itself isn't nearly as prevalent. It's still very important, of course, and there is a rarity system with the loot, but it's not constantly dropping like in a lot of action RPGs. So every weapon you equip is going to have those 3 abilities that kind of synergize and help you make a build. And another thing to consider is, since you can equip 2 weapons and switch between them pretty much instantaneously, you may want to try and get something that synergizes with each other as well. So not only will the weapon work with itself, its own abilities, but the abilities may work with the skills granted by another weapon. The hammer is an interesting one. The scythe is a lot of fun too. In fact, I'll probably show you the hammer right now. Boop. You also have lots of potions. There are a lot of different kinds. Your basic healing potions, they never go out of style because they're always 60% health instead of a flat amount, so they're always useful pretty much. I also found these leech bombs that do a bunch of damage to enemies near me and heal me a bit. I have vampire blood, which gives me a lifesteal buff for 45 seconds. Adrenaline shot, which is a big boost in speed, which isn't just movement speed, by the way, it's also attack speed. And barkskin potions, which give you a bunch of armor. And of course, that's very valuable since you don't actually get armor per se from equipping gear, because you can't. There are no slots for that. Powers are demon powers, and these also have a rarity. As you can see, these are both yellow, they're rare. And what this means is their various effects are going to be increased. So this rare meteor drops twice as many as a common meteor, which usually only drops 4, and the damage per meteor is pretty big. As well as this blink, of course, giving you a bit of a longer period of time where you're accelerated after blinking and doing a lot of single target damage. And there are many of these abilities. There's all kinds of stuff, so yeah. And then the other thing about the game is the destiny cards, which again are something that helps you construct your own build. And these are basically passive abilities, the kinds of things that you would actually see in a class tree, kind of. They have a very tarot theme, which I love, and you have a certain number of points. So I have 11 points right now, and as you level up, you get more slots and more points, as well as some other stuff. That's what leveling up gets you, for the most part. And you can equip, as many as you can fit in the slots and with the number of points that you have. So this number is how many points they take. And these, obviously, as you can see, white, green, yellow, have rarities as well. There are even unique ones, which you can only equip 1 of, and things like that, that have some very interesting characteristics. Right now I've got the Beast, which gives me extra armor penetration because I'm not using a lot of weapons that really have armor penetration, so actually having a kind of an always anti-armor card is kind of nice. The main weapon that does that is actually the Rapier, which I don't tend to use very often, although it is cool. The Guardian is nice. When I'm hit in melee, occasionally I'll release a 150 damage explosion, which is useful, especially when you're being ganged up on by a lot of really small enemies that are hitting you very often. This kind of helps me get out of some nasty situations sometimes. And I also have the Sun, which I really love and have used pretty much the entire game. When you kill an enemy with a lot of damage, like more than is necessary, it's an overkill, and that has a couple of effects. Some skeletons and undead can actually come back once, but if you overkill them, they're guaranteed not to come back. But also, with the Sun card, I'll release a big, you've seen it actually, that big golden explosion when I kill enemies. That's 250 damage and on a 20-second cooldown. There's a lot of other stuff. The Vampire gives you constant lifesteal. Some of the easier, kind of lower ones are just buffs to your basic stats, like critical chance, range damage. And then the Alchemist, which is actually a unique one. You can only have 1 of these equipped. And it lowers the cooldown of consumables by 25%, which is pretty hefty, because as you can see here, actually it doesn't say the cooldown. The cooldown for the Leech Bomb and some of the other strong potions is pretty long, actually. So actually being able to reduce that cooldown is pretty effective. So yeah, that's what, it's a 90-second cooldown. That's what the game entails. Very much an oddity in the action RPG scene. It has a lot of unique mechanics. General gameplay-wise and by look, it's similar to what you're probably used to in action RPGs. But when you're actually playing it, you discover that it's actually a lot different than you might expect because of that weapon system, the kind of hack and slash nature. It's almost Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance or something like that. And the way that you make your own build by a combination of the weapon skill sets you equip, the destiny cards you choose, and the demon powers you have. No classes whatsoever make it very flexible. It's a game with a lot of decision making on your part, which is definitely interesting. The hammer, by the way, is really satisfying to use. Huge, big AoE attacks, very slow but very powerful. And its basic attack is pretty simple, just, you know, a big bunch of hits, but the third attack is a big knockback and has a bit of an AoE to it. Your Q is a crush move, which is really high damage and a pretty sizable AoE, as you can see, and it also can cripple enemies, which decreases their speed by a hefty amount for a short period of time. And then you have Smash, which is this. You kind of go up in the air and slam down into big AoE and get a bunch of lifesteal for a short period of time. And the basic synergy with the hammer is that you use Smash to get a bunch of lifesteal and then charge up a really powerful AoE crush so that you hit really hard and steal a bunch of life in one attack. You know, that's the basic synergy of the weapon. And I actually wish to show you something, if I can not die. And that is that the journal for this game is actually very cool. It has some really nicely... oh god, it came back. Some very nicely drawn art for all the enemies, as well as fun descriptions of the enemies, which for some reason is always something I like. I love it when games have, like, a bestiary to look at. I don't know why exactly, I just love it. I'm gonna die, actually. I'd rather not, to be honest. Run around like a moron, try and get your health back up. Oh my god. That's what happens when you hit a bunch of unique enemies, kind of mini-boss style. Sometimes you can get really easily killed. Dang. These guys are not messing around. There we go. Oh, I almost had him too. Respawn. There are checkpoints that you can respawn at in the middle of levels as well. But anyway, this is pretty unique in the genre, and this is a genre that I really like. I've played many of these games. You know, I love Path of Exile, I love Diablo, especially Diablo 3, now that the actual, you know, updates have made it good. Titan Quest was interesting at the time, and really, this is a genre that I've played a ton of because I just find them very satisfying. And it's neat, even as someone that has played a lot of these, to see one that's really pretty different. I don't mind, you know, samey gameplay in this genre because the genre is very iterative, as long as the game itself is interesting. But in this case, even the basics of the gameplay are very altered from what you would think. I thought that Torchlight 2 was fairly unique at the time. But, you know, with its kind of skill and class system, the way it worked was a bit different. But compared to this is really unique. And I think they've done a pretty good job at actually kind of differentiating themselves in the genre that is kind of coming back to prominence, with games like Path of Exile being constantly updated, Grim Dawn coming out, and, you know, Diablo with the Reaper of Souls expansion kind of coming back to prominence. I think that they really had to do something to make themselves different, and what is probably getting a bit saturated as far as this genre goes right now. And they have definitely succeeded in that. Alright, I need to level up. So, level 19, I got another destiny point, and I get to choose a reward. Ooh, what's this? Power Stones. Oh yeah, the transmutation system was just put in the game in the latest update. Transmutation is something you can do. You can get rid of other weapons you don't need, basically crafting them into one weapon or item that you do want. Boop. So, yeah. The actual co-op, by the way, the game has co-op, is also very good. The co-op seems to work excellently from what I can tell. And because of the whole, you know, synergizing of abilities and weapons and stuff, it definitely stands on its own as a very good addition to the game. The fact that it has co-op is an excellent boon to it, and it is a lot of fun. Yay! Optional objective complete. Oh god, I'm gonna die. Also, there's a dodge move, which is another thing that's kind of different for games like this, unless you're playing Diablo on a console, which does have a dodge move. I like it. I like it a lot. I think that it's different enough to keep my interest, and the updates have been rolling in for it fairly frequently. Like I said, the latest update was pretty large and added that transmutation system, which I'll have to screw about with in a few. But even adding one new weapon in an update is a big deal because of the whole synergizing nature of the weapons and the fact that every one is actually a suite of 3 abilities. Another thing to consider, by the way, is that, I can't see anything because there's a building there, is that unique weapons actually have unique abilities as well, which is very cool. It makes you want to find more uniques like as often as possible because they have abilities that no other weapon has, even if it's a unique longsword won't necessarily have these 3 abilities. It will have abilities of its own, which I think opens up a lot of very interesting possibilities for completely build-changing uniques. The kinds of things that you may find in something like Path of Exile, which is always exciting for an aRPG player. The story seems fairly interesting, with Victor and this voice and some of the characters he comes across as this sort of professional monster hunter-y person, but of course the story isn't quite finished yet, the cutscenes are not in the game, and there's no voice acting as of right now. That looks pumpkin-y. I should probably touch that pumpkin at some point. This must be part of that whole pumpkin secret. Boop! 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 I said boop! Boop! Poke it! Touch. Windbreaker and Windmaker. That sounds like a bad thing. Oh god, I'm gonna die, aren't I? There's a lot of optional objectives and things like that in the game, and there's also... Oh no! He's bats! Turned into bats! There's also a lot of swathes, massive hordes of enemies to cut through, and a lot of these, kind of Diablo style, which is always satisfying and a ton of fun, especially with the weapon variety that you get. There's a good amount of weapon variety already in the game. There's the sword, the hammer, a hand mortar, the lightning gun, the scythe, the dying player. Oh god. Got it. Oh, he turned into stone. What a jerk. There we go. Mow the Annoying? What if I don't want to fight a boss called the Annoying? Seems like a bad deal. Oh dear. Hey, speaking of, there's a hand mortar. And the way that the dungeons work is generally quite fun, with those optional objectives giving you extra loot and experience and dying, as well as the secrets in the game. Very prevalent. That's something I need to talk about as well. There are a lot of secrets. In pretty much every area and every dungeon, there are secrets. And due to the fact that it actually has a kind of proper WASD movement system as well as jumps and wall jumps, the secrets can actually be very well hidden and require some interesting jumping, puzzly kind of things to get to sometimes. And because of the fact that the loot of the game is very, how should we say, important, and not generally given to you in a very, very large amount, as much as you would expect from other aRPGs, it's always good to find as much of it as you can. And with that new transmutation system in, I imagine that is going to be more important than ever, really. I should definitely check out that system very soon. I need to just go back. So, while I'm waiting, how about the actual state of the early access? Well, it is not very buggy. I would have complained about the performance issues that the game has suffered, but the newest couple of updates have solved a lot of those issues, and I'm pretty much staying at a solid 60 FPS all the time now, even when there's a lot of enemies and effects going on the screen. It's still pretty stable now. Like, even right here with all of these effects and stuff going on, I'm staying at 60 pretty much all the time. Used to, it would actually drop down, oh my god, drop down to 30 sometimes unlock itself to 30 for a while, which was really unfortunate, but that doesn't seem to be happening anymore. It seems to be solid at 60 near constantly now. I'm getting a bunch of abilities and stuff. I need to check all this stuff out when I'm not dying, preferably. So yeah, it's unique, and I think it's definitely worth your time. If you want to pick it up in the early access period right now, it is $20, which I think for the amount of content on offer, the pretty large number of dungeons and the co-op and everything is a pretty fair price. It's not that expensive. You can also, if you wish, buy a 2-pack for a discounted price. I believe the 2-pack is $35, so basically you're only paying $15 for the second copy. And you can also get a 4-pack if you want, which is of course a bit more expensive, but it saves you, I think, the cost entirely of the 4th copy. So it's a pretty fair price, I think, and what's on offer here, if it interests you, is worthwhile. And even in its early access state, it is really quite polished already. And again, I would have complained about the performance issues, but the game doesn't actually seem to have any of them anymore, which is nice. You know, that's something to consider, though, that the performance still isn't perfect, maybe, depending on your system. I have a fairly powerful PC, so I can't necessarily comment on the state of everyone's performance, but for me, it works quite well. So, let's take a look at the couple of other things I was going to talk about before we wrap up the video after I kill a gargoyle. Yay, I win! Woo! The voice in your head is very sarcastic, by the way. I want to know who that is. So, let's see. As for the codex, you have these really good art assets for the monsters, with really nice descriptions for all of them, and some strategies about how to defeat them, talking about the kind of abilities that they have. Very cool. I love bestiaries like this, and this one's pretty detailed with a lot of really nice artwork for all the enemies. Definitely a fan of that. I could spend a while reading through that. The boss fights, by the way, are very hectic and fun. Whoops. And as for the weapons, it actually tells you what every attack does, and it gives you a tip on how to make the attacks synergize well. So, like the idea for the hammer that I showed you about using smash and then crush for a big lifesteal combo, it's in the tip right there. It tells you. It gives you a tip for every weapon that I've found so far. Hopefully there are more weapons added soon. And now I'm going to go back to the hub and take a look really quick at this transmutation thing. Alright, let's see how this works. To improve an existing item, put it in the top slot and combine it with up to 3 ingredients in the bottom slot. To create a new item, combine the ingredients in the bottom slots and leave the top slot empty. So you can actually do it multiple ways. Alright. Well, I've got a bunch of white items that I could just kind of toss in here. See what happens. Let's toss in 3 scythes. Not a valid recipe. Well, that's unfortunate. Do I need, like, special things? Or is it because I need, some other kinds of things, like I have dyes, for instance, and this power stone. Alright, I've got an idea. How about I do this? Let's take a look at this sword. This is a pretty good sword. That's a nice scythe, though. Big crit scythe. Let's do that. Boop. Oh, whoops. Put the scythe up there. So these are its stats. If I want to do that, it won't actually do anything. Alright. So, if I put a die in there, put a power stone in there, I probably can't do that, no. And then put another weapon in there? Not valid. Maybe you actually need multiple transmutation stones. You can't actually transmute weapons, maybe? I've actually never used this before. What's the recipe list look like? Weapons. Combine a weapon with 3 weapons of the same or better rarity. Okay. Add a property. Combine a rare or uncommon weapon with a specific combination of 3 legendary demon powers. That sounds cool. Ooh, you can improve Destiny cards with it as well. Ooh, cool. 3 cards of the same rarity and type produce 1 card of the higher rarity if it exists. Can I do that? Do I have enough? I don't think I do. No, I don't yet. Unfortunate. Well, okay, so it's a little more complicated than I thought, which is actually a good thing, because that means there's a rather significant amount you can actually do with the transmutation system, but that also means that I'm not prepared to show it off yet. Anyway, at least now we kind of know how it works. So yeah, this is Victor Vran. There's a good amount of content on offer. For only 20 bucks, it's a very unique entry into the genre that is kind of coming back to prominence now, and is very enjoyable, and I would imagine even more so in co-op. Have some meteors. So, 20 bucks on Steam, the link's in the description below, and any questions or comments, feel free to leave them, and expect to see some more of this game fairly soon as it updates and gets very close to its full release. I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.